My name's Allie. I'm going to be our host and moderator today, engaging the discussion with the amazing superintendent of Dunkirk City Schools, Brian Swatland, and EDIA's CEO, Joe Filio. And I guess a little backstory, Joe and I had met Brian in July of this previous year, when he was just in his first days, maybe weeks of becoming superintendent. And I think we were both just pretty blown away right from the start of his leadership. And I think more specifically, just the drive and the sense of urgency that he had to make a positive difference immediately, and really what that ultimately means is make changes. And I think when we first met, attendance was one of the biggest priorities and initiatives that he had to first tackle, which is ultimately what led to us meeting and our partnership. But fast forward now, within 6 months of that time, Brian has quickly become really a rising superintendent, and has, I think, been reached out to by almost all news stations in New York State, and even nationally, really to learn more from him, because in that span of time, when we started, the chronic absenteeism was at about 38%, and it has very quickly been reduced to, I think, most recently about 19%, across the district. And so that's a remarkable achievement, but it really is a direct reflection of Brian's leadership, and really how he has changed the culture of attendance and rallied the whole community and his staff around prioritizing this initiative. So, that is what really brought us and inspired us to have this conversation, because we know that Dunkirk City Schools is not the only school district, and Brian is not the only superintendent that is working on this challenge, and is addressing and implementing attendance strategies. So we really wanted to create a space for people to learn from what he has done, and the challenges and successes that he's faced, and create a space for collaboration amongst you all to learn from. But before we get started, I'll also just share a little context that Dunkirk is a city school district in Western New York of about 2,000 students, a really diverse population of about 19% English language learners, about 80% are economically disadvantaged, really special community of different cultures and religions and languages, which I think definitely brings the context as well of some of the challenges that they face. But I'll also say that most of this conversation will be hearing from Brian and the strategies that he has implemented. And but the ending of it, we will reserve some time for a Q&A. So if you do have questions for Brian throughout, or for Joe, you'll see at the bottom of the screen there's a little Q&A button. You can enter your questions. If there's anything that we can respond to immediately, my team might answer it in the moment, but questions that require more elaboration from them, we will save those. But to kick us off, Brian, I'd first I just appreciate your time today. I guess can you just start by sharing a little bit more about your background, and what led you to become superintendent of Dunkirk City Schools?
Sure. Thanks. First of all, thank you for the kind words. It's humbling, it's I just doing my job and trying to improve outcomes for this community, for our community. Honestly, becoming superintendent here, I was in the right place at the right time. I started my career as a physical education teacher, coached varsity football, wrestling, and track for 17 years. I became an assistant principal for four years, and then I became a principal. And the high school I was at was ranked number 5 in Western New York, and we inched up the rankings into number 1 in Western New York. But along the way, I really I didn't have my passion, my professional passion, which is working with underserved families, underprivileged families, and marginalized students. So, I moved to Dunkirk as a director of secondary ed, and then I was there for 5 months and then became superintendent from that position. So it was really, for me, it was the right place and the right time. And I'm more than appreciative to be here and to do this work and try to reshape a community. So
Yeah, that's it's definitely very special. And when you first joined, can you describe, because I know chronic absenteeism quickly became the biggest initiative that you had. Can you share a little bit about what the state of attendance data, attendance processes was, and why that was identified as the biggest initiative?
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, to really sum it up, it was there was no system. It was overwhelming. I think I joked with you and Joe the first time we met that, one school wasn't even taking attendance. So, we had perfect attendance throughout the year for that building. It was a big struggle. And when you look at last year, we were at 38.5% chronically absent. That's 840 to 860 students. And we had an attendance TOSA for the district. Each building had attendance teams, and there was no place to start. The list was already massive by the second week of school. And, because of that, our academic achievement data was very low as well. Kids weren't in school, they weren't learning, and working in the secondary school last year, which is a 7 through 12 school, we really started to focus just on seniors because we couldn't divide our efforts amongst everybody because there was just too much. So we worked on seniors. We were able to raise our graduation rate by 7% last year. It was the highest that it's been in Dunkirk in the last 30 years. But the whole system was broken and it needed to be fixed.
And so it sounds like kind of one of the first things that you recognized was just the accuracy of data and even just attendance simply being taken on a regular basis across all schools. But then also there were just so many students that were absent that people didn't really know where to start, and there weren't clear processes around that, it sounds like.
Yeah, we had people that worked hard at what they were doing, but there was no process to it. There wasn't a list of interventions, there wasn't tracking, there wasn't, reaching out to families. It was a lot of the time we spent each week because we met every Friday morning for about 3 hours on students. And most of that time was just compiling accurate data sets and interpreting the data rather than starting with a complete set of data like we do this year.
Gotcha. And it sounds like one, just the accuracy of data might be one of the biggest challenges. Are there any other big challenges that you feel like that you feel like you were facing in tackling that?
Yeah, I think accuracy of data and the human element, partnerships with families. Last year it was a robocall that went out to families. They were told their child was absent, and there was no two-way communication. There was nothing coming back from families. There was too many phone calls, individual phone calls to make on a daily basis. So, when you have 800 to 900 students absent, we don't have the people power to be able to influence and to attack all of those instances. We also didn't know why students were absent and the biggest reason why students were absent last year. So we were really flying blind in terms of we worked hard, no doubt, but it wasn't a concerted effort. It wasn't a team effort, and we weren't all going in the same direction.
And it sounds like maybe because you didn't really know why students were absent, that maybe the interventions that were being put in place, it might have just been a kind of a universal strategies rather than what students individually or holistically really needed. And now, Joe, I definitely want to bring you in as part of this as well, because I know stories like this are partially what inspired the attendance platform getting started. But could you share just a little bit of EDI's founding story and what inspires you to create an attendance solution to support districts like Dunkirk?
Yeah, sure, Ali. Well, as Brian has been sharing, I think it's a issue a lot of districts have grappled with, especially post-pandemic. Nationally, I think chronic absenteeism has doubled since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and the culture changed, right? They went from being in for 100 years, everyone was at school every day, and that's the expectation, and you had to come to school. And then for a year, 2 years, we're saying, don't come to school. You're going to get everyone sick. You're going to die. Don't do that. And that was, important in some ways, but it really changed the culture and the expectations. And even parents, a lot more parents work from home now. And so it's different, right? Than if they're going to the office, their kid needs to go to their office, their school as well. So those expectations have really changed, but it's had a devastating impact on outcomes, on student achievement, on the culture. Um, and I think as Brian had said, a lot of districts were trying a lot of things. They were doing a lot of efforts, but they weren't working. There wasn't a clear unified strategy for what to go do, for what would make a big impact. And so it's really in talking to hundreds of districts, like Dunkirk, that we're facing this problem that we came up with what could be done with using some of the most modern AI solutions. And but that said, it takes a leader, a great leader, to then not just, I view ED as building tools, and it still takes a great team, a great leader to go use those effectively and then and make a big change.
Yeah, absolutely. And and so I think, we have an understanding from you, Brian, of what you were walking into and kind of what was ahead of you to tackle. What were the first steps that you took to address the attendance and engagement challenges of the district? And why did you choose those first steps?
Um, I read a lot and researched a lot. Did a lot of research and did a lot of digging on why students were absent. Um, I dropped my car off. It's maybe a long story, but it's actually pretty funny. Dropped my car off to have the tires changed, and we're a walking district, so our students up to a mile and a half walk. So I'm like, well, this is probably the distance that our kids walked. I totally misjudged it. It was about 4 miles, not a mile and a half, but I had a lot of time to reflect as I'm walking. It was in the summer and it was hot, and the only time I got a breeze was when I got through a cross street, and then the wind would cool me down. Um, but it got me thinking, like, why do our kids miss, and why are they missing? So it really led me to do a deep dive on. I know that on our days last year where it was below, 10 degrees and it was snowing, that our absenteeism rate dropped 40%. Um, we we don't have faculty meetings after school. We have early releases. So going through that data, I know that if we have a half day release, we're looking at 40% of kids in the building. If we have a 1 hour early release, we're at 80%. If we have a 2 hour early release, we're at 60%. So it was really diving into, finding out why students were missing, and then being able to look at our attendance teams and try to use the people in the best position and give them the tools that they need. When I was the director of secondary education, I was meeting with the math department. They brought up EDIA, the math platform. So that when I looked at it the first time, scrolling down, I saw that there was the attendance tracker. So after my long walk and getting some water and cooling off, then I went back to the internet and looked up EDIA and really researched the AI component. I brought a lot of AI into the district. We use AI a lot. Last year, I used an AI master scheduler that we had a lot of success with. Building a master schedule for 900 students with 7 different requests. It's over 6,000 different options that we have. So we had success with that. So that's when I reached out to EDIA to learn more about the attendance platform.
hmm So kind of sounds like first doing your research of what what's kind of doing your research on your own district of trying to uncover the data, the trends all on your own, but then also doing research of what strategies are out there that people are using and that are working, and of course researching EDIA. I guess like to get a little bit more tactical. I know you said that the attendance committees, that was a big place to start of
Mhm.
revamping their processes and also just revamping the data accuracy and how they're tracking things. Can you walk through a little bit of what, what changes you made to how the attendance committees were running?
I really didn't change much. I put more ownership on the building administration because everything was falling to the attendance committee. So I put more ownership and accountability on the administrators to make sure that attendance teams were meeting. Essentially, I think we had attendance teams on paper last year, where we actually have attendance teams working this year. All the research I did talked about family engagement, talked about making a warm and welcoming environment, reaching out to students. We're doing that in our attendance teams now, but the difference is we have actionable data that we can use when we meet with those teams. We don't have to waste time to look and try to sort through things and try to figure out reasons why students aren't here. Even families that don't respond to the text, that's data. Now we know that this is a non-responsive family. That means we have to double our efforts with this family. So even with a no response, that's great data for us. But now we understand why students are missing, and we're able to give them the right interventions rather than just a general intervention for all students.
Hmm. And so it sounds like before that, um, maybe you had data, you maybe knew who was absent and who was chronically absent, but that may have been as far as the data went, and whether or not the teams were meeting, is one thing too, but also a huge part of that might be because the data that they had was not very actionable and just seemed probably very overwhelming of even knowing what to do with it. And so now when your attendance teams meet, I know you said that the data is actionable. What do those attendance committee meetings look like, and how are they using EDIA in that setting to start action and to actually start making progress?
Yeah, so each school has its own dashboard, and each student, we have the responses from the parents. So we're about 40% response rate throughout the district, which I think is great, and I'm pushing to increase that. But we already start with knowing the reasons why. So before in a robocall, we didn't know if there was a school avoidance issue, if there was a bullying issue, if there was a home family issue, if there was a medical concern. So we had zero information. And then, as our attendance teams trying to figure that out. Now knowing, the program flags bullying, anxiety, school avoidance issues. So those families and those students already jump to the top of the list. And that's where the administration gets involved, and they make those phone calls home. But using the interventions that EDIA has built in and offer suggestions based on the family situation or based on the report, telling us if it's an engaged family or a disengaged educational family, that allows us to shape how we interact with families. We have to build trust with families, and that was one thing that we didn't have with robocalls. Now we're starting to build trust because even though an AI chatbot, which it says it is, families respond when it says, "Have a nice day. Thank you. You have a nice day too." So it's like a really genuine interaction with families, and that's really helped us to build those partnerships with the families. And I really think that parents are beginning to believe in us again.
I'll just thanks for sharing that, Brian. I'll just echo, what what Brian just said and what we hear, more broadly too, is that, the stat that blew my mind is 75% of absences are unexplained, meaning no one on average, meaning, parents aren't, most absences, no one knows, the school does not know where that child is. They don't know why they're not there. And if you don't know why a student's not showing up, what you end up with is just a big list of 100, 200, 300 kids at a campus who are chronically absent and nowhere to begin, right? Nothing to go do about it. And so even just some context to Brian's point about are they engaged, not engaged, are they being picked on? Is it because it's an hour, a mile and a half, or in Brian's case, 4 miles to walk to the school? Those all make a big impact and change how the district responds. So it is a 50% response rate goes, I mean, that goes a very, very long way in cutting down that list and giving you some signal what where to start.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you think about it, we have 400 more kids in school on a daily basis learning than we did last year. And now we're starting to see the benefits of that in our achievement data. Because last year we were at about 34% average on 3 through 8 New York State testing for proficiency. And our mid-year data, we're at 63% of our students are already on track for making typical or above typical growth for the school year. So that's what it's all about, the hard work with attendance to get kids in the seat to improve outcomes. When you're working against generational poverty, it's very difficult to break. And this is helping us break through that generational poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big things that always sticks out to me too is that of just the difference of I think more traditionally of maybe how things when things were happening before, just how long it might have taken. Maybe eventually we would get some information about where students are, why they're missing, but just how long it could take a whole school year to find that out. And by that time, they've already been absent for a good chunk of the year. And so it sounds like, again, with your team, instead of spending all their time trying to sift through or trying to really find out that data, they already have that information and can really approach it ultimately on an individual level, as for students, socially, emotionally, but also for families, of really it's a family effort. Now, when you all have been looking into those reasons why students have been absent, have you uncovered trends or most common root causes of why students are absent at the district?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest response is health and medical, which is one of the reasons why we're getting a school-based health center. So now students won't have to miss school to go to the doctors or to go to the dentist. We'll have doctor's offices within our buildings, dentist office within our buildings. So hopefully that will further bring students into school and maybe bring some students in that wouldn't normally be in because of the what we're offering them. But we've also seen school avoidance issues, which allow us to deal with those really when they're percolating, not when they're boiling, which gives us a real chance to head those off before they get really bad. But like I said before, even the one of our biggest responses is a no response because we're able to actively assist those families in what they need, because it's so easy to see who is in school, who's not in school, and when we don't have a response, we know that that's a student that jumps to the top of the list.
That is such a cool story about the health centers, and that's another point too. We've heard stories where districts will look at their heat map and notice bus route issues and change their policy there, or we've seen situations too where an elementary school may have way more absences than a middle or high school on transportation. Why is it? It's because their carpool line's 40 minutes long, and it's messed up, and so there's these things where it's like kind of when you can bring data to to your decision making, you can just make better decisions or bring your whole community along with you. And hey, 30% of our absences are health and well-being related. Like, what are the investments we can go make to fix that? So that's an awesome change. When's that going to be up and running, Brian?
That will be up in the next year. So not this upcoming school year, but it should be ready for that next school year. So it'll be great.
Very cool.
Hmm. And I remember when I met with your attendance team, one of the things that they shared, like along with the health concern, is because of the distance of walking, and especially in the winter, that if a lot of students have asthma and a lot of parents are scared to send them to school. And with that, again, thinking of if we can help educate on health resources and even have health resources at the school, just that sense of safety and support for them to feel comfortable sending them to school in those times. Um, absolutely. And so I guess when we're thinking, we see a number like 38% dropping down to 19% at this point. I mean, what is that? How do you see that impact? And I know we've kind of discussed it on a high
Mhm.
level for like an individual student in a day-to-day life of what that impact really means.
Yeah, we have students in school, they're laughing, they're having fun, they enjoy being here. We like I said earlier, our academic achievement data has really gone through the roof. And I think that's only the start of it. Students need to be in school. Students need to be connected. Students need to be here for life experiences. And we're giving them that opportunity by reducing, that chronic absenteeism number, and now it's right around 400, down from 835 to 850. So, I couldn't be more proud of the work we've done. My problem is I see the 19%. Like, why are we still at 19%? And so that's my own internal issue I have to deal with, not anybody else's. But I want every student in school every day, and I want every student to have a positive experience in school. So, it's a much better place when we have more students within the building.
Yeah, and I know with 19%, that means we still have a road ahead of us to still be tackling. I guess when you think about the next year, the next 2 years, what are the immediate things that come to mind of changes you're still looking to make or to enhance that you've already implemented? Where do you see the next year for attendance strategies at the district?
I think it's this year, it's building the partnership. Families need to know we're looking out for their best interests. Families need to know that we have to build that trust and we have to build the relationship. And unless we have a true partnership with our community, we'll never be as successful as we can be. So it's just nurturing that partnership, spreading the positive word anytime I can. I was on the radio this morning talking about chronic absenteeism and how we're doing. The board meeting Tuesday night talking about it. In the newspaper the week before, highlighting, what we're doing. So always getting that positive word out there that this isn't the same old Dunkirk that it was before. That it is a different district. It is a different school, and we want our kids here. So
That is great. And Brian, I mean, what I keep hearing too is trust, in community trust, and what you've done from 39% to 19% is, or 38 to 19 is, I mean, that's half. That is incredible. We work with a lot of districts who've never, and talked to even a lot more, and that's just really off the chart success. But even that said, your point about trust, like it takes time to build it, right? And that's something that you've started on this year, and then in the coming years you'll keep doing. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense as you rode from 19 to 9.
yeah,
Not to
that'd
give
be
you
awesome.
a goal there.
Mhm. And yeah, when I think about, I think it's interesting just the kind of the overlap and intersectionality of technology, and but also that this is really deeply human work, and we're building trust, we're building family relationships, and technology can support us with that, but also it can enable humans to be much more effective and productive with building the relationships, which is ultimately what we know needs to happen. I guess, how do you think about balancing those two things with technology, but also just the deeply human work that this is?
Yeah, and it's using technology, getting actionable data to be able to drive our people systems. And that's really, where it comes down to is, we can't waste time. and our kids' lives are too precious. So we need to make sure that we always have actionable data, and that's what EDIA gives us. That's the beauty part of it. So, AI is not going anywhere. And I'm thankful for that because I use it all the time. Rather than telling people not to use it, and rather than telling kids they can't use it, we have to show them how we're using it. So now every time I talk about this, I'm showing the community that we can use AI for a greater purpose, for good, and it's not all bad. So, using AI to give us the data that we need, it turns it into actionable work for us. And I think we're working harder than we did last year, but we're working smarter because we're working harder in different areas and harder in different ways. Think about, if 200 students are absent for 20 days, think about all the different, reasons, 200 times 20, and it just, where do you start? How do you start with that? So now we can work harder in interventions. We can work harder in the phone calls home. We can work harder building those relationships with our community where we don't have to waste that time. It's all preloaded for us. So, I think our attendance teams are appreciative of having everything right at their fingertips. And then being able to move into the new platform next year with the student information, I think that's what's going to elevate us next year, is having that complete data set where we know attendance, we know discipline, we can pull up students' star scores, we can pull up, anything we want on our students. That's going to give us a head start on how we intervene academically, behaviorally, social, emotionally with our students.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're running low on time, so I definitely want to give a few minutes for the Q&A because people have some really insightful questions. The first one is for Brian. Someone asked, how has parent engagement and transparency with your schools changed with the implementation of EDIA? I'm curious to know if more families are seeking more help from your schools when they encounter situations that might affect attendance and well-being.
Yeah, our communicate it's again, it's gone from one-way communication to two-way communication. We've even gone as far as using the EDIA app to, if we need an answer from a parent, it's easier to text them through the app when we take control of it and get a response. We're a working community. We're surrounded by plants and manufacturing. Our parents, they don't have the time to make a phone call, but they have a time to respond to a text, and we're seeing that parents are reaching out more. We have more actionable issues since using EDIA than we did before. We know more of student avoidance. We know more student disengagement. We know more family issues because of the EDIA app.
And I'll just add though that it takes a courageous and effective leader to want that transparency. Some districts I don't want to know I don't want to know the problems. Then we have to go do something about it, right? And that's obviously not the right mindset. But you have to start with what's happening and how can we go and then fix it. And that's exactly what Dunkirk's done and to huge success.
Thank you. Yeah, the only way to change it is to put it out there. I didn't shy away from our um, academic achievement data. I put it in the newspaper my first week on the job. So this is where we're starting at. It's not where we're going to end, but it's where we're starting. So you can't hide it. You got to put it out in the forefront, and that's what generates and drives the change.
hmm And kind of leads to this next question that someone asked. Someone asked, Brian, beyond the academics, what's been the biggest impact across your schools and district that you've seen with the increase of attendance?
Well, I think it's getting the building of community and having more kids in school, giving them a chance to be kids. Like we have a policy where if a student's not in school, they can't attend athletic events. They can't attend nighttime events. Students who aren't in school, if they're on an athletic team, cannot participate in athletics that day. We see more students engaged in school or even go to the school dances. We have more students engaged in school to be able to go to those community events now. And then, expanding that out to reading nights and STEAM nights and just trying to get the community involved. But I really want to say that the kids that are coming back into school now have hope and have a hope for a future where they didn't have that before.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful that how much more kids can be kids when they're in school and especially can access those kind of activities. Um, and one question here is for Joe. Joe, in what ways are you seeing the districts you serve change in regard to family engagement with school resources? And are you collecting data on how much EDIA is connecting families to other resources that they have access to?
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of districts and campuses, they put so much time, whether they have a fully dedicated staff member dedicated to calling parents for attendance, or whether that becomes a part-time job, effectively an invisible job for everyone at the building. The secretary, the assistant principal, the interventionist, all those support, people. Um, it becomes a hidden kind of task or job for them to make these phone calls, and say, hey, your son didn't show up, your daughter didn't show up, it's been 3 days, what's going on? Um, and if EDIA can in the districts we support, EDIA helps do that. And what it does is it frees up a huge amount of time for campuses to, rather than just finding out the basic information of what's happening, they can go and solve the problems. And I think cool examples of that, sometimes they're not always with the parent too. Sometimes, EDIA helps identify, hey, this student keeps missing just fifth period. What is going on in fifth period? It's worth someone going and talking to the fifth period teacher and saying, is something happening? Did something happen there between the student and another student, or between you? What's actually happening? There's an issue that's obviously, present. So that's really the biggest change that happens. It sort of unlocks a whole new kind of set of work and a higher level, I think, to better problem solve.
Well, I know we're up on time, so I want to be respectful of that. And there are some other really great questions that maybe we can respond to via email.